Welcome, everyone. My name is Phoebe Morad. I'm Director of Lutherans Restoring Creation, and I welcome you to this session where we will hear from fellow Lutherans who are restoring creation. And tonight we hear about maybe not the outdoorsy way that we typically consider caring for creation, but the way that we use our assets to care for each other, for our neighbors, for those people we'll never get to meet. And as I open this up, I had welcomed everyone, and I'm just going to paste it in here again. I welcomed everyone to consider all of the communities, especially the past communities that were the first original keepers of the land on which you stand. And I will mention that I am on land that is still taken care of by the Massachusetts people. So if you don't know the other communities that are the original keepers of the land, check out that link and keep researching and finding, and it's a process. Not only find out the name and how to pronounce it, but learn a lot more about the people that are the first caretakers of the land. I'm going to share with you what Lutherans Restoring Creation, we're coming up with our own, not just a land acknowledgement, but more of an acknowledgement that we're not the only ones that care for creation. So I'm going to read this, and I ask for any feedback, maybe not now, but when you can, when you think of it, let me know. We acknowledge that as we are called to restore creation, we're also called to restore right relationships with one another. And as part of this ministry, we honor all our Indigenous siblings who have cared for these places and beings since time immemorial. We invite non-Indigenous communities and individuals to learn about the original and continuous stewards of the land upon which you exist, as we join in this holy vocation of loving our neighbor. So, in loving our neighbor, I'm going to hand the baton over now to Jonathan. Pastor Jonathan, are you okay? I know that we can certainly mix things up if you don't want to go first, if you're just getting settled in your chair, but you're okay?
I can go first, absolutely.
Okay, excellent. And I know that there have been several other connection calls that we've been lucky to have you on, but for those of you who don't know Pastor Barker, he is the author of Jesus Would Demand a Green New Deal. And also too, do you want to say where you're calling from right now? Oh, there you go. Where you're calling from right now, and I know you've been freezing for a reason, and you can tell us a little bit more about the place you call home.
Well, absolutely. So I'm calling in right now from Grace Lutheran in Kenosha. Let's see. I think I was making a weird sound. Also really excited at our congregation, and I know our friends in the Northeast Iowa Synod have gotten excited about this, but we're all praying what's called the mustard seed prayer. And if you're interested in getting one of these magnets, I'd be happy to share that with you. It is a daily prayer that about, I think we're close to 200 people are praying for creation care. And again, it's for people all throughout the country and even world. So we're excited about that. And then I've gotten to be blessed with a couple other unique opportunities. I was actually just, as Phoebe said, I was staying outside here in Wisconsin to do some fundraising. And one of the people I was staying out with was one of the Wisconsin Seven. So 7 of us last year fasted for 22 days to be in prayer and fasting for statewide climate action. So I've gotten to be blessed to do a lot of different things. I'm excited for a couple of churchwide memorials that I've been part of. So hopefully you can go back and check out some calls. They're all on Lutherans Restoring Creation. And we've got 2 memorials, one calling for a line in the sand around what we hope to see our denomination stand for, and another one about how our denomination itself can reduce its greenhouse gas emissions. This evening, really excited, and I don't know if I can screen share or not, Phoebe. Hopefully, if I'm allowed to, I'd be excited to, but get to talk about what it means to think about our finances and our financial life and how that can impact our care for creation. Phoebe, does it work to do a screen share?
I made you co-host. That didn't do it, huh?
Oh, no, I can probably, if I click the button right, it'll probably work.
Okay.
Sorry about that, everybody.
That's okay.
Wait.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I've got slow internet here, so it's just taking a second to load.
You might have to do a liturgical dance instead.
Uh-oh, that's a world of trouble waiting to happen. So the first thing I want to screen share is thinking about something we probably all have in our wallets. So a credit card. And so both the credit card companies we use and the banks we use, oftentimes we might think, oh, that's just a convenience, but it also has deep implications about where those profits go, how those banks operate, whether our banking is funding fossil fuel projects like different pipelines that are going in. We've got Line 5 right now that we're resisting here in Wisconsin, so which has some major bank backing. And so Green America has a credit card that I like using. You can check that out if you go to greenamerica.com. I can send Phoebe the link later for that. So that's a way to have a credit card that doesn't link us into big banks. And then there's no easy way to do this across the country, but the other major thing you can do around what's in your wallet is switching to a credit union. And we have some great ones here in Wisconsin: Educators Credit Union, Summit Credit Union, which does solar loans, even in home energy efficiency loans, is just awesome at low rates. And again, this gets you out of big banks that are, again, complicit in funding fossil fuel projects. And the other thing that's just amazing, and I always kind of throw this in as a little sweetener, I was a Citibank customer for a long time, and then a US bank customer for a long time. And you go up to the window there, or you call the customer service line, and the very first thing they ask is, have you considered buying this new credit card or this new investment thing? Or, you can't go to the bank without them trying to sell you on something. And then you get the statement in the mail, and you're trying to figure out the fees and all the stuff that's going on, and you're just insanely frustrated about what feels like theft. And anyways, you go to a credit union and they never ask you anything like that. You just bank and do your thing, and you don't have to deal with any of that. And your money's also not going to fund different corporate things that you don't feel comfortable with. So really want to lift those two personal banking situations up as ways to, it's relatively simple. You make these changes. And again, these are great companies that not only do they, are they about, is this credit card says people on the planet, but, or the planet, but it's also about people and getting great customer service. So that's the first thing I want to lift up. The second thing I want to lift up is the social purpose statements, or I'm sorry, the social purpose funds in the ELCA. And so in 2019 at Churchwide, we were able to get through a memorial about switching, or at least prioritizing switching from non-social purpose funds to social purpose funds. And as you might be familiar, our denomination has some wonderful social statements. If you've never gotten to read them, I would encourage you to do that. My new members always have to do that. They have to read the social statements of our church. So there's no surprises, and also so they can get excited about what we're about. Those social statements not only are documents laying out our ethical stances and what we believe theologically, and they've got great biblical stuff and theological arguments, and as a pastor, love them, but they also have real world implications, because we use those to set investment strategy for what we call social purpose funds. And so clergy and other church staff can make sure they're invested in social purpose funds rather than non-social purpose funds. One of the big scandals last year that was just so or not last year, 3 years ago, is the non-social purpose funds were invested in the detention centers on the US southern border. And not only that, but of course, fossil fuel infrastructure, coal infrastructure. They're very intentionally diversified. They'd say with the maximum diversity is the least risk. And so you're a little bit invested in everything, including weapons and just everything that you could imagine you're invested in. And fortunately, we have these amazing screened funds. And so for clergy, really want to lift up switching over there. You can also encourage your pastor. I think every pastor should be encouraged to do this. And I don't think there's anything inappropriate about asking your pastor at church council, are you invested in the social purpose funds? We would really, we really think that this is important, that our leaders, not only, they walk the talk, they invest the way they do. I don't think I won't bother screen sharing this step by step. It's a long document. It has it's not super easy to switch over if you haven't switched over, or to check, but I'll send that over to Phoebe if you're interested, and hopefully she can create a link for that. And then, was I supposed to talk about fossil free funds? Because I do use that site as well, or was Pat going to jump in on that?
Pat, we don't want to take that away from you. If you want to talk about that, Pat? Was that you? Oh, we can't hear you. You're on mute. He's saying you can. I can read his lips. And I did, just before you move on to the fossil-free funds, just to lift up, you said, I don't know how comfortable people would be asking their pastor about it, but I will create a post with like a recording of this and that link so that you can say, hey, can you just check this out? Because as you have noted numerous times, lots of people just assume that it's Portico, it's all socially responsible. But especially if you've been in there a long time, your funds aren't necessarily in the right. Is that true?
Amen. So we were able to get it switched. So now young, not young necessarily, they could be any age, but clergy that are getting their first calls now automatically are put into the social purpose funds rather than the non-social purpose funds. That was my huge scandal, that why would we default people into the non-social purpose funds? Because again, you'd think, oh, we're a church-wide organization. We would really invest in like child detention on the border, military weapons, pornography, alcohol, fossil fuel, all this stuff. You'd think, of course, as a Christian body, we wouldn't do that. So yeah, that's great. I read a great book about Benjamin Lay. He's one of my heroes. You can check out, if you Google his name, you'll find the New York Times bestseller about him. He was one of the first abolitionists in the North America, at least of European descent. He was on slave ships, or he was a sailor who knew people that had been on slave ships. And he was inspired after hearing their stories around love of neighbor to make a stand. And so he would do things like put his body on the threshold of these Quaker churches in the 1600s and make them step over him as a way of casting judgment on, at that point, Quaker clergy who still held slaves. He would stand up and interrupt services and demand where church, are you willing to stand with me? I think we're at a point, this is my own, I'm just kind of saying my own heart on this. So this doesn't represent anybody else's heart, but I think we're at a point in the climate crisis where we need to be calling out churches and pastors who aren't willing to take bold stands. But again, that's where Pastor Barker stands on this. That doesn't necessarily reflect where the ELCA stands or Lutherans Restoring Creation. Fossilfree.com is a site that I love. Divestment is really something that's really important to me. Like many people, I have an IRA invested outside of Portico. And so I personally wouldn't invest in any fund that, you go to this site, you type in the stock ticker, and it tells you exactly what funds are invested in, including many funds that claim to be ESG, which is environmental, social, governance-based funds. And it's amazing if you go to, for instance, BlackRock, which is this major investment firm, if you go to their ESG funds, or if you go to Vanguard, they have a very famous, well-funded, well-thought-of ESG fund. If you go to those funds and type them in, their tickers, you'll see that they're invested in they have holdings in all sorts of fossil fuel stuff. This site also has military industrial complex, prison stuff, and other screens as well that are important, at least to me. And so that's another great tool you can use to find funds you want. And I'm just going to pull up. So I've looked at literally thousands of different funds because I want to be 100% divested. And it's actually, again, it's much harder to, again, a lot of these products that bill themselves as being socially responsible actually aren't 100%. So I just want to lift up the tickers of my two large cap funds. So that large cap refers to large companies. That's oftentimes considered to be more stable than non-large cap. And the first one is, hold up one second, I'm just looking down my list of investments. Change X, and again, well, I'll do rather than find all these, I'll send them out to Phoebe and she can put them in the links. But there are some good ones I found that way you don't have to look through 1,000 different stocks to find the great funds.
And I have to say too, I really appreciate that you are sharing this as Pastor Barker, not as, but that's why Lutherans Restoring Creation is great as a grassroots organization. You're sharing your personal experiences. A lot of personal experiences and ideas are being shared in the chat. This is where we get to do this because the ELCA can't come out and say, you all should, and we're not saying that either, but we're sharing our personal experiences. So I really thank you. And yeah, why not share what you've already done? Because I know if most people on the call are like me, I don't have time or I don't have the capacity. I don't like reading directions in card games. So this is way too much information really for me to typically go through. So I just appreciate you sharing your homework. Thank you.
So just to reinforce that, I'll just share my screen. And this is what he's talking about.
Thank you.
And I put in one of my funds that I'm very happy about. But as you see, it has 0 fossil fuels, so it gets an A here. But even so, it grades on other issues, and I still get a C on the gender equality thing. So that's just for information.
Yeah, that has everything. Thank you so much. So there are a lot of, for one thing, very much agreement on the urgency that we need to, there are many reasons, and Tor, I know, mentions just the idea that we do have to move on all fronts, and everybody, regardless of how many assets you have, needs to put your body on the line. Pat, speaking of getting your body out there, if I can hand the baton to you, so Pat Almonroad, not only, so by day he works as an attorney in a law firm, but also he is our superstar secretary of Lutherans Restoring Creation, our board, one of our inaugural board members who's been around from the very beginning. Thank you very much. And one of the stories that I'm just going to share right off the bat that I so appreciate from Pat is, it was the 2014 climate march, right? That you helped pull together, that you had a cross out and people came running up to you thinking that you were there in opposition of the climate action march. And that, yeah, just the idea that as a religious community, we need to be seen as on the right side of history as well for a change. So anyways, but also I know you've been doing that in many other ways. So if you share some of your experiences and knowledge on this, we all appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, sure. Thank you, Phoebe. And I'm here because I would basically follow Phoebe anywhere. She's been an amazing director of Lutherans Restoring Creation. And I just am happy to be here because she asked me to. One little correction, it wasn't for the 2014 March, that incident. It was for, I want to say, gosh, when was that? Maybe a 2020 Women's March here in New York City. So it wasn't down in Washington, but, I think that probably, frankly, that probably is even more fraught in terms of religious symbolism. There were a lot of people thinking, oh, the Christians are here to shut us down. And it's like, no, we're marching with you, So anyhow, I wanted to talk about a couple of things in particular. And I'm heartened, I'm happy to see a number of faces in my generational cohort on this call, because one of the things I wanted to talk about is a newish organization that I hope some of you at least are familiar with, called Third Act. Third Act is sort of the newest thing by Bill McKibben, who of course is one of the co-founders of 350.org, and from a long time ago has been working on institutional divestment especially. As Bill got older and looked around him and thought about what to do next, he realized that regardless of our own individual position in this, our generational cohort, folks over 60, have about, I think, depending on just how you count this up, we control about 70% of the individual financial wealth in this country. And Bill thought, well, we ought to do something about that. We ought to use that leverage. So he founded this organization called Third Act that right now, at least, is going to be working on two things, two sort of major campaigns. One having to do with democracy, with preserving the vote and expanding the franchise, and the other having to do with climate change, especially right now with personal divestment. And this touches on a lot of what, of course, Jonathan said earlier. But one of the things that I found really exciting about Third Act's plan is that it's not, it's, how do I put this? It's aggregating the effect of personal divestment, because, you know, I think, well, I don't really have a whole lot of money. And even if I did, if I walked down to my bank, which unfortunately is Chase, and told them today I'm moving my money, they'd say, well, all right, sorry to see you go, bye-bye. You know, they wouldn't care. So what Third Act decided to do, in conjunction with a number of other organizations, Stop the Money Pipeline, Green Faith, a number of other folks are involved in this, but they decided to have people take a pledge to divest. And these pledges are going to be used as leverage, hopefully, to get the banks to make changes on their own. And if they don't, then all at once, maybe in December, maybe in January next year, I'm not sure they've actually fixed a date yet, but all at once then, all of these pledges are going to become effective, and we're all going to move our money. And that's that. It's not, you know, it's not like me or Susan or Jonathan doing it individually. It's all of us all at once. And that's gonna require some attention. That's gonna get some attention. So I think that's a brilliant idea. Maybe I just hadn't heard of it before, but it's the first time I've heard of anybody doing that. And let's see, I can share my screen here. What do I want to do? Sorry about this. There we go. Here's Third Act's website, and especially the page on Bug the Banks. And there is, oh, I can't scroll, can I? Phoebe, how do I scroll? There we go.
You should. Yep. Good, good.
There's the pledge. I don't know if you can see it with, you know, the way you have your screen laid out. But you can click on either of those boxes if you're one of the big four. If you have an account at one of the big four, or if you're not an account holder, you can sign the pledge as well. And as I said, this will all be aggregated and hopefully really make a difference. Now, if you're anything like me, you think, well, this is great. I'm going to do this. In fact, I have signed the pledge, but I haven't the least idea of what comes next. How do I actually move my money? What little there is? Well, fear not. Other people have thought about this. And one of the best places that I've found so far is a site run by, what are they called? Rivers and Mountains Green Faith Circle. They're in a town just south of Albany, New York. And they have this whole website set up for aligning your money with your values. And they offer workshops, both in person and online. So you can gather, it says here someplace, gather, you know, 2 or 3 of your friends or your whole congregation, or however, whatever group you want to put together. And you can get them to present to you then an online workshop on just how to divest yourself personally. And they go through a number of steps: personal banking, credit cards, home and auto insurance, which I hadn't even thought of, retirement investments, which Jonathan talked about already. So I would certainly recommend this resource to you. And I know there are other resources out there like this as well, which, you know, some of you may have some familiarity with already. So let's see.
And that's called Rivers and Mountains Green Faith Circle?
Yeah, let's see, I'll put the URL in the
Oh,
chat.
look at that. Sue already did it. Thank you.
Ah, there we go. Thank you, Sue.
Excellent.
So Phoebe, I think that's about what I had planned. So if you want to take it back.
That is excellent. I will, for one thing, I just want to, actually, there's one piece that you didn't talk about. What was it like to speak out in front of a bank? Like, this is because this is like you're doing, you're doing this behind the scenes, but what was it like and how did you end up speaking in front of a bank? What was that, last year, birthday?
It was, gosh, earlier this year, I think. No, it was October of last year. You're right, October of last year. And I wasn't actually in front of a bank. I was in front of the bank. I was in front of the Federal Reserve in New York. Big ornamental doors, which I don't think ever opened, but it made for a nice backdrop. And, you know, this was part of a, gosh, I'm sorry, I can't remember what coalition had put this action together now. Third Act piggybacked on it, but I was there as a member of 350 NYC, and they needed somebody to just speak briefly and to introduce, I think it was Scott Stringer, the comptroller, former comptroller of New York City, who recently did a really big thing with divestment. He finally, gosh, do I have this right? Either actually achieved divestment of the New York City pension funds or urged all of them formally now to divest. There are 5 different pension funds that the city runs. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure exactly what the situation is. But at any rate, I was there just kind of rallying the crowd. It was, I don't know, it was fun.
Well, the thing that I noticed was that you had your God's Work Our Hands t-shirt on.
Yeah, that was from the 2014 March.
Okay.
From ELCA advocacy.
No, also when you were in front of the bank, you had that on.
No, I know, but that's where I got the shirt.
You got it. And I guess that just says a lot. And I just want everybody on the call to remember that no matter what kind of activism you're taking part in, consider just wearing the shirt or wear your cross or wear, you know, that it says a lot. It says a lot to our church and it says a lot to the people that you're in community with. I loved that.
And along those lines, you know, one more thing about Third Act, just like 350 did with local affiliates, Third Act is organizing local affiliates, but also affinity groups. So for instance, I'm trying to organize a lawyers affinity group within Third Act, and I'm also part of a faith affinity group. There is a webpage on the Third Act site that you can go to and sign up for the faith affinity group there. Love to see you. It's growing by leaps and bounds.
And speaking of affinity groups, I'd like to pass the mic to Leslie Sand if she's available to talk. She just mentioned greenpenny.com, but Leslie is in the chairperson of the affinity group for Citizens Climate Lobby. Leslie, are you able to show your face? Or do
Yes, I am.
Yes,
I am here.
Leslie.
Yep. I have a cold, and so I was not even, my head was not in this today.
I can also just read your chat if you want me to do that.
Oh, well, you know, I can talk about it. In fact, first of all, I want to say thank you to Pastor Jonathan for bringing up credit unions, because I have to say the reason I got out of big bank cards several years ago was not because of getting out of their fossil fuel stuff, but more because of just the way they do business in general. So I've been with a credit card company a credit union for a long time. But we have in town a locally owned bank that has been our bank for years. And the family that owns it is employee owned, but the family that has run it for years, 3 generations now, they're ELCA members. And it's Decorah Bank is the bank that hosts Green Penny. And Green Penny is a virtual bank that it's pretty wild. And so anyone can have an account with Green Penny, and all of your business with them goes to fund mostly solar projects, but they're getting into wind. Also, they're in, I think, 5 states now. I was going to check with them before tonight's meeting and get an update, but like I said, my head wasn't in the game. So they're growing by leaps and bounds, and it really is neat to put some money in there, and it just gives a feeling of personal power. So they've got, in fact, they've got, I was just looking, they have, I don't think they have their own credit card, but they have ATMs worldwide with no fee. They have free checking, they have savings, they have CDs. They're now doing mortgages. And Jason, I don't know if he's the president or CEO, but he did tell me several months ago that they are working on getting into IRAs. So it's a really neat option.
Yeah. I'm just surprised as to how many other options there are out there. And yes, so I am gonna compile all of this. I will save the chat just so you all know you don't have to keep opening a bunch of different tabs. I will have all this for you. I next want to hear from Susan, who has been working a lot with the Maryland Delaware Synod. And I just want to intro, for one thing, Susan is an organizer extraordinaire and also a great champion of the Earth Charter coalition that's putting together, that has been doing so much to implement what we talk about in the Earth Charter. And this is just one way of doing that. But she's going to talk about her experience being able to lift up how is your synod invested. I just want to say that way back when we first had the resolution to divest, and our New England Synod said, yes, we'll divest and we should tell our churchwide assembly to do the same thing. Well, we did it, it passed. It was all very exciting that everybody held up green cards and said, yeah, we're going to divest. But it wasn't until I think almost 2 years later that at some soup supper at our church that I got to sit down next to the bishop and I said, so I just wanted to check on something. And he realized that, oh, I don't know if we did ever talk to our finance guy about really doing that. And he just had to talk to him he happened to have a meeting with him the next day and he made sure they were actually really divested. Wasn't a lot but there is this like constant follow-up that has to occur that I just want to make a plug for, that we can say this and we can say we divest. And I know that some people that work in the financial world recognize that some organizations say commit to divesting, but don't really know what that means. So anyways, it's just like land acknowledgement. It's a process, but we have to keep following up with it. And knowing Susan, I know she will, but I'm going to hand it over to you, Susan, for what you've been starting.
Okay. This is just one slide that we presented to our synod, which is Delaware, Maryland Synod. We presented this to our finance chair at the beginning of February. And we have 2 things that have been talked about already on this call. I'm so excited, the fossilfreefunds.org and the Green America Better Banking site. There's also this Interfaith Center on Corporate Responsibility that was pointed out by a woman at the ELCA. So I'm going to stop sharing this and then go back to what became of this conversation. Share screen here. It's our resolution for this year's Synod Assembly. And the cool thing is, be it resolved that the Synod and all member churches and all individual congregational members learn what their investments are funding and prayerfully consider moving away from investments that fund non-sustainable projects, specifically fossil fuels, and that we invest in renewable energy. So the cool thing about this is that the chairperson of the finance committee is co-submitting this resolution. And so we really do think, because we know he's had conversations with the fund managers, we don't know the results of that yet, but we do know that he is moving forward in that direction. And so that's our happy time talking.
Thank you for doing that, Susan.
Yeah, Larry's on our team.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we may run into a little problem with our resolution when we get questions about Thrivent, because I know Thrivent does not even have a sustainable or a social responsibility fund. And I think just about every fund that Thrivent sells has fossil fuels in it. So maybe we should alert our membership about this Thrivent reality, because anyway, I've been doing a little talking with them, and they're into churches all around. But I think our membership should realize that. And I don't know whether that's going to lead into a confrontation or not, because I think some people may, a little stand off of that. So anyway.
So does Reverend Barker have anything to say about that? I saw him nodding his head.
Just that, yeah, I mean, that is a huge scandal, right? And Thrivent 100% doesn't. I broke my relationship off with Thrivent about 5.5 years ago. And one of my members was my Thrivent rep. And that was painful. He left my church, and his family left my church because of it, 3 generations. But, are we want to be invested in fossil fuels or not? I mean, to me, that's a big line in the sand.
So had you had conversations with anybody at the high level, in Thrivent, to know that they're not open to?
What I was told is they, at some point, maybe 10 or 15, I guess it would have been maybe 15 or 20 years ago, because this was 5 years ago. At some point they had a fund like that, and it didn't get much, there weren't many participants apparently. And they ceased doing that and now have no interest in it. That's what I was told. I don't know if that's true or not, or just an excuse.
I want to acknowledge 2 hands. I don't know what order they came in, but Nancy, go ahead. Do you have a question related to this? I take it.
Yeah, thank you. Our Ascension Lutheran Church in Burlington, Vermont has enlisted a Thrivent investor. In other words, we pay him to help us invest our funds, but we have stipulated no fossil fuel. And he meets with a finance committee every quarter and he shares his screen and lays out what all the investments are in. And I feel good about that. I mean, we just made a statement. The finance committee made a statement that council then approved, that we would not invest that in fossil fuel funds. And so it's very interesting to see him lay out what they are invested in, and to see how they're doing really well too.
Nancy, if you could share that with either Susan or Larry, that might be helpful, because I foresee some sort of a objection to our resolution on that basis, but I don't, my Thrivent rep said that there were no funds, there were no social responsibility funds.
Well, he's investing in funds generally.
Separately. Okay. It's not Thrivent funds.
In the market that are fossil fuel free. So
okay. I'm sorry, I misunderstood then.
It's fossil fuel free, but we're using him to do that for us.
So it's a compromise.
It's way too complicated, it feels like, for our finance committee to do that.
Yeah. Okay. Mark, go ahead.
Well, Jonathan and Larry probably have more current information, but I have a legacy Thrivent account from my parents, and Thrivent does fund our Care for Creation team, nickel and dime projects. They just funded World Water Day, our book giveaway today. You were on that for some of that time, Phoebe. I think you missed the book giveaway, but that's nickel and dime. That's not the big picture of what they're invested in, which is highly problematical in the direction they've gone, and it's quite controversial. But I will say, the last time I actually had a conversation with them, I said, okay, I support ESG. I want to buy something from you that has that. And they sort of subcontracted with Sentinel. And I don't hear boo about what Sentinel's doing in ESG like I do with, say, Amy Dominy, which is, I think been pretty good for me. So yeah, I'll just leave it at that. But the consumer demand apparently is not there for Thrivent now, and there are a lot of other reasons for that too.
Well, as Lynn is pointing out in the chat too, they should try to reinstate it. Maybe there are more people now that are interested, and maybe that is something that as an organization we can help with, at least lift up the voice as to how many people are interested in this. I wanted to also go back to Steve, and Steve, if you're still available, I know you wanted to talk about what your synod was doing. Hi. Oh, you have to unmute though.
Okay, so I guess first I'll say the Florida Bahamas Synod, which exists in the Miccosukee and Seminole land, that perhaps we need to look at that a little closer. But what we're doing, I was approved to do a creation care workshop at our Synod Assembly that's coming up the first week in June. And I'm going to focus on portfolio manager so that our congregations can start to learn how to save energy, that creation care can be good for your bottom line as well as other lines. So I'll be assisted by a pastor who's a Green Faith Fellow. And we hope that we'll have several congregations that can get certified through this workshop. And I know Portfolio Manager's trying to do a big push this year for Certification Nation. And if we can get 4 others besides St. John's to get certified, then, we'll, I don't know, get a sticker in our window or something. But that's what we're trying to do. Thank you.
Excellent, Steve. And you bring up the idea too that it is investment as well alongside divestment. And yeah, Portfolio Manager is free, right? Steve, what you're talking about and representing is free. It's run by the government and it's been there for a really long time. The EPA does offer this. It is incredible, but it does take someone in your congregation that will take the time to enter the data. But again, if you leave a space for it, yes, Lisa props up the fact it's a great tool. If you leave space for it in your budget and have a budget line item that's ready to be filled with maybe whatever savings you have, that might be something that helps your finance team want to do it. If they know they're going to end up with that savings. That's one tactic to take. Go ahead, Steve.
When we started trying to do some creation care stuff, maybe 10, 15 years ago, and a lot of people were very doubtful that it made any sense. And, I didn't read anything in the Bible about that. And, crack that book open and you might find something that'll shock you. But I had suggested that one of the things we could do, we had a lot of can lights with flood bulbs in them. So I printed up an envelope that was buy a bulb. So we, instead of trying to get a line item and have a big budget battle, I just got permission to hand these out at worship service and for people to put in $25 and we could buy an LED bulb. And we had we had like 130 of those bulbs and we replaced them all. And the power bill went down dramatically from that. And then I had all of these naysayers previously saying, hey, what else can you do for us? I read about these Nest thermostats. Maybe we could put one of those in. So it can be an easy process, easier than it might look at first.
I think too, what's interesting about this whole conversation is that it is great if we can say you're going to save money. It is great to say if you're going to get great returns, but we're church. That's not why we're doing it. And I think it is important to start off that conversation with the understanding, as Steve just mentioned, crack open that Bible and see what it has to say about that. And that's why I really appreciate working with all of you, because it is not just the bottom line that we're coming around to. Sometimes we have to talk about that to get someone's attention. But yeah, I know a lot of you on the call right now have to get up to that pulpit and talk about the reason we do things is not just for the bottom line. So anyways, I appreciate all that you all bring to this. I want to ask if there are particular in the next few minutes, are there more questions that you have, especially for our speakers, or any experiences that you've had? I know that Lisa's on the call and been chatting up and serving up a lot of great resources. Lisa Brenskelly, I thank you. I also want to lift up that Lisa has a great piece written in allcreation.org. I'm going to try to link to. But Lisa, did you have anything that you wanted to add, because you do a lot for this? Or are you still?
Well, I posted several things in the chat, although some people also mentioned them, some of the speakers did. What I would really like is to find someone who would be willing to present on this topic, because I want to have a speaker who will address the topic of divestment and taking action on divestment as a moral issue. And I've been looking for a speaker here in Houston who can address specifically the bank aspect, right? Because there's your personal investments, but there's, who you bank with and trying to advocate with banks and stuff like that. And I have not been able to find a local speaker, but I want to find one. And if it doesn't have to be local, because we can make it a virtual event. So if anybody knows of an excellent speaker on the topic, I would really like some contacts.
Thank you, Lisa. And
really
Gabriel, you're saying you're going to do it, right? Is that why you have your hand up? You'll be that speaker, Nick Gabriel? I'm just kidding. Just kidding. I bet you have a question.
If somebody wants to volunteer, let me know.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Lisa. Gabriel, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to toss out that one of the challenges that I've run into in our congregation's conversation about shifting to green investments is that the average representative of different mutual funds and other financial institutions has a financial motivation oftentimes to talk you out of ESGs. And the reason is because the returns that they're going to get through other vehicles is going to be a little bit better, and it's going to make them look better as an institution. So you need to inoculate for that when you're doing those conversations, or find someone else to help facilitate those conversations. Otherwise, you're going to run into that. And then you're going to have your council members going to be like, oh, well, but Pastor, I mean, we're going to get 4% better annually on this vehicle. So, I don't know. And then you got to deal with that. So just tossing that out.
On that theme too, I mean, the other thing you're going to bump into is, even Portico, they'll tell you this, well, you're going to be more stable as an investment if you have more, which, at one level I get, right? But at another level, if you think about where fossil fuels are going in the next 30 years, I think that's a little bit of a hard position to maintain. And so I think there is a way to push back on that. I hope I didn't freeze up in the middle of that, but they're
No, keep going. Go ahead. We hear you.
Oh, well, yeah. So just to think about it. So even though they say there's more stability in it, there's no way we're burning fossil fuels in 30 years. There's no way we're probably burning a lot of fossil fuels in 10 or 15 years, or we're totally all up a crick. So, I think that's also a fallacious argument that we need, a huge umbrella. And the social purpose funds, for what it's worth, are still like 90% of the market. It's just minus these vice funds, so to say. And they also know, if vice totally paid, they actually have funds like that, and they actually don't do as good as people claim. So, anyways, there's ways to push it back against that common argument too, that, you're going to have less stability if you have a screened fund.
Wally, did you want to say something, or no, you were hooraying?
Well, no, I actually did have my hand up.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Phoebe. And as I've been hearing these very good comments about why it is a good thing to divest from fossil fuels. The underlying theme I'm hearing is the burning of them. That is only part of the picture, as we mostly know in this group. The production of plastics is something that is also tied directly to fossil fuel production. And the fossil fuel industry, from what I've heard, has been saying that, amongst themselves at least, that they're going to be transitioning as they get the reality of this shift going on away from their fuels to burn and the fossil fuel impacts of that for greenhouse gases. Their focus is going to be on selling products that involve plastic or those kinds of compounds that they can produce and make money on. So they're probably going to be shifting that direction, which as we know has its own problems and challenges to try to move away from fossil fuel based plastic. So just thought I'd make that comment.
Thank you. That is really important to recognize. And I noticed Robert mentioned that as well, that especially the idea of divesting, there's no easy answer to really know if you're really untethered from all of this. And also, if anybody else feels like they're going to walk away from this meeting, just not knowing what to do next, knowing that all of you are doing some is really helpful for me. So I really appreciate this. Sorry, let me know if I know that there might be some other questions in here, but if you really needed to ask a particular question or offer something in particular. Yes, Larry, I see you.
I think one of the points to make at this point is that the prices for these petroleum fossil fuel companies are quite good right now because of the affair in Ukraine. And so it's a great time to sell those stocks and move in this direction of social funds and environmental funds.
That's true. The other thing that I just wanted to make a plug for, I didn't talk too much about it because we're honed in on what our churches and synods and congregations are doing, but the faithplans.org that I just listed on a global level, and I know anyone who went or followed COP26 also could attest to the fact that every other denomination is doing this. And I mean, that's what I know Pastor Barker has always referred to. Every other denomination is doing this. We're not like on the leading edge here. We're not. So again, let's kind of catch up. Let's do our job in taking care of our neighbor. And these are lots of different ways to do it. And it is the way our church works, which I'm really happy about. It's just very messy, but it is grassroots, the way that we're built. And I appreciate that. But as anyone who wants to stay on and talk about the memorials that we have going, it's messy and complicated and confusing how we make decisions. But yeah, that does mean that it might take us a little longer, but that does mean that we all have to be involved. So I appreciate all these different ways. And one thing that I do a note that I want to end on as well is I want to lift up the fact that having this conversation, like a coffee hour with somebody who has never really thought about this, probably isn't the way to start integrating caring for creation in the church or the environmental topic with some of your friends at church. If you want something that's a little bit of an easier lead, I'm going to just make sure that you all know about the worship service that we have going on for Earth Day. Because what I really appreciate about, a 45-minute worship service is someone can sit there and be fed, and their mind can work on things and their heart can work on things that you're not going to be able to put there with any kind of numbers or figures or what their bank account's going to look like, or as we were talking before about kind of the climate chaos, or Tor, what did you call it before? It's like weather porn, that you just have a lot of scary images. That isn't gonna get people to work with you, to be honest. But our worship is the place where we can be fed and refueled. And I don't mean that to say that we're greenwashing anything, but that we need to be fed by creation alongside trying to restore it. So I thank you all for taking the time to listen. And I now would like to ask for a closing blessing to be read by Naomi. And I'm going to divulge here that Naomi happens to be my mom, which you might be able to So I'm gonna ask her to unmute because that would help, huh? There you go. Oh,
All right.
yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. This is a Franciscan blessing for justice. May God bless us with discomfort at easy answers, half-truths, and superficial relationships, so that we may live deep within our hearts. May God bless us with anger at injustice, oppression, and exploitation of people, so that we may work for justice, freedom, and peace. May God bless us with tears to shed for those who suffer from pain, rejection, hunger, and war, so that we may reach out our hands to comfort them and turn their pain into joy. And may God bless us with enough foolishness to believe that we can make others claim, that we can make a difference in this world, so that we can do what others claim to be done, to bring justice and kindness to all our children and the poor.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you all for being with us together. I will stay on the call if anybody wants to huddle about any questions or confusions about the memorial. But all of the rest of you, thank you so much for being here together. Have a wonderful evening. And we won't be together on a connections call until May, because in between you're going to go to this worship service and be fed, and a bunch of other Earth Day stuff that you can all find links to on our website. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Bye. Thanks, Mom.
You're very welcome.
Okay, I'm going to pause the recording.